What happens when television's most respected interviewer sits across from one of the most polarizing figures of modern royalty? At first, it looked like a calm, dignified conversation. But as minutes passed, the tone shifted. What began as polite questions soon spiraled into sharp exchanges, eye-rolling replies, and a mounting tension that no one in the studio could ignore. By the end, it would no longer feel like an interview. It would feel like a battle. Diana Sawyer, known for her composed professionalism, sat poised in her chair, smiling with the kind of grace that had disarmed world leaders and celebrities alike. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, dressed immaculately in a cream blouse and tailored navy blazer, her hair styled in cascading waves. She carried herself like someone prepared to control the narrative from the very start. "Meghan, thank you so much for being here," Diana began warmly, her voice carrying that balance of kindness and authority that had made her one of the most trusted figures in American journalism. Meghan returned the smile, but there was a subtle edge to it. "Thank you for having me. It's always enlightening to be invited onto platforms where I can clarify the truth, rather than the twisted narratives people like to spin." The audience chuckled politely, though the undertone in Meghan's voice didn't go unnoticed. Diane's eyes flickered with the faintest sign of surprise, but she pressed forward with grace. "Well, that's exactly why I wanted to talk with you. People have seen headlines, but they haven't always heard your voice directly. Let's start simple. How are you doing? How is life these days?" Meghan crossed one leg over the other, straightened her back, and gave a deliberate sigh. "Life is busy, demanding. When you've lived under constant scrutiny, you learn to thrive in spite of it. But it's important to remember that people like me, people in my position, are often the ones carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations." Her tone was firm, almost as if she were lecturing rather than conversing. Diana nodded carefully and allowed her a moment before continuing. "And how is Harry?" Diana asked gently, a smile softening her words. "Many people admire the way you've stood by each other through challenges." For a brief moment, Meghan's face hardened, her expression sharpening. She tilted her chin upward. "Harry is fine. But let's be clear, Harry isn't my shield or my story. People always want to make me the side note to him. But the truth is, I'm the one who has had to navigate relentless hostility, far more than he ever did." The answer was pointed, almost dismissive of the question itself. A murmur spread through the audience, just audible enough for Meghan to notice. She leaned back slightly, clearly unfazed. Diana, unfaltering, tried to ease the weight of the reply with another smile. "I understand. But people are curious because they see your marriage as a partnership." Meghan laughed softly but without warmth. "A partnership? Sure. But let's not pretend that people don't constantly try to define me through him. I think it's insulting." Diana inhaled slowly, her smile steady but thinner now. She shifted gears. "Let me ask about your children. Many viewers at home admire the way you speak about motherhood. How has it changed you?" This was where the tension became more palpable. Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Changed me?" Again, that's the assumption, that I needed changing. I've always been strong, independent, aware of who I am. Having children doesn't define me. I define myself. But of course, people love to paint me as if motherhood somehow redeemed me, as if I needed redeeming. The studio grew quieter. Even Diane's co-producers, watching from behind the cameras, exchanged nervous glances. Meghan's words weren't just sharp. They carried an air of defiance that turned even the gentlest of questions into triggers. Diana remained collected, though her posture shifted subtly forward. "I hear what you're saying. Still, many mothers feel a profound transformation. It's a shared experience." Meghan cut in quickly. "Yes, but my experience is different, Diana. And I think we should stop trying to make me relatable to everyone else. I'm not everyone else." Her words landed heavily, echoing in the silence that followed. Diana took a measured breath, keeping her calm intact. She transitioned, hoping to soften the atmosphere. "Let's talk about your journey with the royal family. You've spoken openly before, but how do you feel now, looking back?" And that's when Meghan's expression shifted once more. Her jaw tightened, her eyes gleamed with irritation, and her voice grew noticeably sharper. "Honestly, I feel like any mention of the royal family is a trap. Every time I'm asked about them, it's not curiosity, it's judgment, packaged as interest. I don't owe anyone answers about an institution that thrived on tradition at the expense of individuality." The words hung in the air like a blade. Diane's smile faltered for the first time, just slightly, though she quickly recovered. She nodded, acknowledging the response without agreeing or challenging yet. The tension had arrived. Viewers could feel it. What started as a polished professional interview was slowly transforming into a verbal tug-of-war. Meghan's tone carried an unmistakable arrogance, and Diane's legendary composure was being tested in real time. And this was only the beginning. The camera zoomed in tighter, capturing every flicker of expression across Meghan's face. What had started as polished elegance was hardening into something sharper, colder. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms loosely, signaling that she wasn't here to be handled. She was here to dominate. Diane, steady as ever, adjusted her notes. You've spoken about the challenges of entering the royal family. But at the same time, many have pointed out that the titles, the recognition, and the visibility also brought opportunities. Do you see that balance? Meghan's laugh was abrupt, a little too sharp. Opportunities? Let's call them what they were. Chains, Diane. The so-called opportunities were just expectations to perform, to smile, to play a part in their antiquated play. You might see it as a gift. I see it as exploitation. Diane nodded thoughtfully, refusing to flinch. I hear you. But others might argue that visibility gave you the chance to amplify your causes. Women's rights, mental health advocacy, racial equality. Don't you feel the position also allowed you to make a difference? Meghan tilted her head, smirk tugging at her lips. Difference at what cost? I didn't need a tiara on my head to care about women's rights. I didn't need a palace to speak about mental health. The irony is, Diane, people seem to think that without the royal family, I wouldn't have had a platform. That's an insult, frankly. Her words landed heavy. The audience, seated just beyond the bright studio lights, shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged looks. Some clapped softly in support. But many could feel the dismissive edge cutting through what should have been thoughtful answers. Diane leaned forward slightly, her voice still soft but firmer now. I don't think anyone would deny your talents or your passion. But visibility is powerful, and whether you intended it or not, being part of the monarchy elevated your voice to a global stage. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Elevated by whose standards? I was already making a difference before any of them knew my name. It's time people stopped acting like I should be grateful for being tolerated by an institution that didn't even want me there. There it was, the sting. Diane's professional calm wavered, though only for a second. She straightened her papers slowly, buying herself time. She had interviewed presidents, dictators, and movie stars in full scandal, but Meghan's defensiveness carried a unique venom. Switching gears, Diane tried a lighter angle. Let's talk about your Netflix series. The first season had tremendous success. There have been reports, rumors really, that you requested a larger budget and more control for the next season. Can you comment on that? Meghan's eyebrows shot up, her lips curling into a cool smile. Rumors. That's your word, not mine. Let me be clear. When you're creating content that reshapes narratives, you don't ask for permission. You set the terms. If people want my voice, they'll have to understand it comes at a premium. Quality isn't free, Diane. The remark landed with a jolt. A few people in the audience audibly gasped. Diane, ever composed, kept her tone light. I understand that perspective, but some critics have framed it as being demanding. Meghan didn't miss a beat. Demanding? Or refusing to settle for less than what I deserve? Funny how women with standards are called difficult, while men with the same standards are called leaders. Don't you find that interesting, Diane? Her voice had taken on a lecture-like cadence, as though she weren't answering questions but issuing declarations. Diane folded her hands carefully. That's a fair point about double standards. But let me press a little. Do you think some of the backlash could be less about gender and more about perception? That perhaps the public feels disconnected when statements about privacy and peace are paired with very public contracts and productions? The temperature dropped. Meghan's smile vanished, replaced by an icy glare. Perception is a lazy word. People believe what they're told by tabloids, and journalists, she let the word linger, who thrive on poking at contradictions. Privacy doesn't mean silence, Diane. Privacy means I decide what to share, when, and how. That's power. And yes, I've earned it. Her tone was condescending, daring Diane to challenge her. The silence stretched, taut as a rope pulled too tight. The control room whispered frantically into headsets, debating whether to cut to commercial. But Diane raised a hand subtly to the floor manager. Not yet. She wanted this to play out. The veteran journalist smiled again, but there was steel underneath now. Let's pivot slightly. When you think of your time in the royal family, what do you feel? Anger? Sadness? Relief? Meghan adjusted her posture, leaning forward this time, her voice dripping with disdain. I feel nothing. Honestly, they're irrelevant to me now. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about a crumbling institution. I've moved on. It's the media that can't let go. That landed like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the room. Diane blinked slowly, choosing her words with surgical precision. You don't think the royal family remains relevant in any way? Meghan's laugh was sharp, dismissive. Relevant to who? To people clinging to fairy tales and outdated traditions? Maybe, but not to me. They're a relic, Diane, a museum piece, and I refuse to live my life as someone else's exhibit. The arrogance in her tone filled the studio like smoke, thick and suffocating. Even Diane's unshakable calm was beginning to crack. Her lips tightened, and her pen tapped once against her notepad, a subtle tell, but enough to signal the shift. Meghan, she said carefully, you've built a career on speaking truth, as you call it, but don't you think truth also requires humility? The question was soft, almost gentle, but its edge was razor sharp. Meghan froze, her jaw tightening. Humility, she repeated with a scoff. It's interesting how people demand humility only from those who dare to stand tall. I've bowed enough in my life. I won't do it here. The words landed like thunder. The audience, caught between awe and discomfort, leaned forward in silence. Diane, with decades of patience under her belt, inhaled slowly. She gave the smallest of nods to herself, as though acknowledging privately. The storm was here. The polite opening of the interview was long gone. The battle lines had been drawn. Meghan's arrogance was no longer subtle. It was blatant, unrestrained, and the patience of one of television's most respected journalists was wearing dangerously thin. And as the cameras kept rolling, everyone in the studio knew something explosive was about to happen. The studio was silent except for the soft hum of the cameras. Meghan leaned back in her chair, arms folded across her chest, her expression set in that familiar mixture of defiance and superiority. Diane sat opposite, pen resting idly on her notes, her legendary composure beginning to thin like glass under pressure. Let's move into something personal, Diane said carefully, her tone still professional, but tighter than before. Your husband, Prince Harry, many people see him as central to your story. How would you describe your relationship today, given all the pressures, the attention, and the choices you've made together? Meghan smirked, tilting her head with a dismissive chuckle. Harry and I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Our marriage isn't some public soap opera to be dissected by the media or reduced to sound bites. Frankly, it's insulting that you even frame it like that, Diane. We're stronger than ever, and unlike some people, we don't need validation from strangers. The audience reacted audibly. Some gasped, others shifted uncomfortably. Diane didn't blink, but her jaw tightened. She tried again, softening her voice. I meant no disrespect. I was asking because many admire the way you two present a united front, and they're curious how you maintain that strength. Meghan's reply came like a dagger wrapped in silk. Curiosity isn't entitlement. People confuse the two. Our private lives are not here for public entertainment, no matter how desperately interviewers want to squeeze a headline out of them. The sting was unmistakable. Diane's hand twitched slightly as she adjusted her notes, her patience being tested inch by inch. She chose a new angle. Let me ask about your children. You've often spoken about wanting to protect them from the same scrutiny you faced. How do you manage that balance, given how public your work and appearances remain? Meghan's lips curved into a humorless smile. Balance is a word people like to throw around when they don't understand what it's like to be me. My children are protected because I say so, because I refuse to let vultures circle them. And before you ask the obvious follow-up, no, Diane, I don't owe the public pictures, details, or anecdotes. They're mine, not anyone else's storyline. The sharpness in her tone rippled through the studio like static. Diane inhaled slowly, visibly forcing her calm. I only asked because you've spoken about motherhood before in very personal terms, and I thought our viewers might appreciate hearing more about how you navigate that. Meghan's laugh was clipped, cold. Viewers don't deserve every piece of me, Diane. That's where people get confused. I share what I want, when I want, and if that's not enough for them or for you, that's not my problem. The studio audience sat frozen, watching the tension mount like a slow-building storm. Even the camera operators glanced nervously at each other. Diane pressed her lips together for a moment and then tried one more pivot. Let's turn to the monarchy. You've been outspoken about your experience with the royal family. Looking back, do you feel there's any room for reconciliation, or do you consider that chapter fully closed? Meghan's eyes flashed with irritation. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. Reconciliation? With an institution built on hypocrisy, on outdated rituals, on people who never wanted me there in the first place? Why on earth would I reconcile with a system that thrives on exclusion? No, Diane, that chapter isn't closed. It's burned. The words landed like dynamite. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Diane blinked slowly, a flicker of genuine shock crossing her face. But Meghan wasn't done. You see, people like you love to romanticize the monarchy, fairy tales, castles, crowns, but for me it was a gilded cage. And the sooner people stop expecting me to bow down in gratitude for being trapped, the better. That was the moment Diane's patience visibly wavered. Her pen tapped once, sharp against her notepad. Her calm smile faltered just enough to reveal a sliver of steel beneath. Meghan, she said evenly, I think it's important to remember that while the monarchy has its flaws, it also gave you a platform that amplified your voice globally. Don't you think there's at least acknowledgement owed for that? Meghan scoffed, her voice rising with irritation. Acknowledgement. I owe them nothing. If anything, they owe me for putting up with their nonsense as long as I did. I built myself long before I ever walked into that palace. Harry may have been born into it, but I brought the authenticity. Without me, they'd still be just another tired royal family trying to stay relevant. The audience gasped again. Come on, buddy. Aiden, louder this time. Diane's face hardened, though she kept her voice level. That's a bold statement. It's the truth, Meghan shot back, her tone now openly combative. And people can't stand it when a woman, especially a woman like me, dares to say it. The air in the studio was electric now, thick with tension. Diane, her legendary composure fraying, leaned forward slightly. Her voice, still measured, carried a sharper edge. Meghan, I've interviewed presidents, activists, even war survivors. I've seen strength expressed in humility, in grace, in perseverance. What I'm seeing now feels less like strength and more like arrogance. Do you see how that might come across? Meghan's jaw tightened, her smirk returning with venom. Arrogance is just a word people use when they can't handle confidence. I refuse to apologize for knowing my worth, Diane. Maybe that's uncomfortable for some, but that's their problem, not mine. The silence after her words was deafening. Diane's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and the camera caught it, a flicker of fire that signaled the breaking point was near. In the control room, producers leaned forward, whispering frantically, "She's pushing her. She's really pushing her." Meghan sat back with a look of triumph, as though she'd won something invisible. Diane, however, adjusted her notes one final time, her composure hanging by a thread. The audience could feel it. The veteran journalist was about to snap. And when she did, the fallout would be unforgettable. The cameras rolled on, the studio lights burning hot. Meghan shifted in her seat, her chin raised high, her arms still crossed like a queen enthroned. She exuded defiance, every line of her posture screaming that she was untouchable. Diana Sawyer, however, sat silently across from her, the weight of decades of broadcasting composure pressing down on her like a shield. But that shield was cracking. The silence was long, almost unbearable. Then Diane leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate, and sharper than ever before. Meghan, I've given you the space to tell your story. I've listened as you dismissed, deflected, and talked down to me and to this audience. But let me be perfectly clear. This isn't strength. This isn't authenticity. This is arrogance. And frankly, it's unbecoming. The audience froze. The control room erupted with gasps and panicked whispers. Meghan blinked, her composure wobbling for the first time all morning. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice colder now. Diane didn't hesitate. "You've spoken of privacy while seeking the spotlight. You've rejected the monarchy while benefiting from every ounce of its visibility. You've demanded control while mocking anyone who dares to question you. And through it all, you've treated this conversation, me, and the people watching at home with contempt." Enough is enough. The studio erupted in whispers, the tension unbearable. Meghan's mouth fell open slightly, then snapped shut, her eyes flashing with indignation. "You have no right." "I have every right," Diane cut in, her tone sharp as glass. "I've sat across from leaders and survivors who've shown more humility in 5 minutes than you've displayed in an hour. You talk about power, Meghan, but power without grace is just ego. And that's what you've shown us today." Meghan's breath came faster. She leaned forward, her voice trembling with anger. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've endured. And yet here you are," Diane interrupted, her voice unwavering, "painting yourself as the sole victim, dismissing everyone else's truth but your own. Let me remind you, without Harry, without the royal family, without the very platform you claim to despise, you wouldn't be sitting in this chair. You wouldn't be here at all. The words landed like a thunderclap. The audience audibly gasped. Meghan's face flushed crimson, her lips trembling as if searching for the right comeback. But for the first time, there was nothing. Diane pressed on, her tone final, unshakable. You came here today, and instead of showing grace, you showed condescension. Instead of engaging, you lectured. And instead of conversation, you gave us contempt. This program cannot and will not continue in this way. Not with you treating it as your personal stage. Meghan had shot to her feet, her blazer snapping sharply as she pulled it closed. This is outrageous. I won't be spoken to like this. Diane's voice cut through the chaos. Then perhaps you shouldn't come on shows where you expect to be worshipped instead of questioned. That's not journalism. That's theater. And we don't do theater here. The studio went dead silent. Meghan, her face a mask of fury, yanked off her microphone and tossed it onto the chair. The sound echoed like a gunshot. This interview is over, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. And you'll regret the way you've treated me. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed off stage, her heels clicking like hammers against the studio floor. The cameras caught every second, right up until she disappeared behind the curtain. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Diane turned back to the camera, her expression calm once more, though her eyes still burned with fire. To our viewers at home, she said softly, I want to apologize. This is not how interviews are meant to go. We strive for honesty, fairness, and respect. What you just witnessed was none of those things. And for that, I am sorry. The audience, stunned but grateful, broke into hesitant applause. Diane closed her notebook, set down her pen, and leaned back. The storm had passed, but its echoes would ripple far beyond that studio. By evening, clips of Meghan's walkout and Diane's unflinching words would dominate headlines around the world. And in living rooms everywhere, the question would linger. Was this the day Meghan Markle finally lost control of her own narrative? If you enjoyed this dramatic showdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the never miss the next explosive story.